guys, we're ready to go. Week 1 is here. We are talking about fantasy football. Week 1 starts and sits. I want you guys to tune in here every single Wednesday to get you guys set for the week for fantasy football 2022. Now, I got a schedule coming out. Wednesdays is going to be starts and sits. So every Wednesday morning, join me here. Sit back, grab your coffee, whatever you're doing, whether it's your drive or commute, whether you're going to work. I'm going to get you guys covered every Wednesday for starts and sits. And how I run this show, guys, is very, very simple. You're going to love it, guys. I'm going to go through every position. I'm going to tell you based on matchup at that position. So quarterbacks, I'm going to go through quarterbacks. I'm going to tell you, do they have an optimal matchup? Every position. So I'll say, well, for example, this week, right? Josh Allen, does he have a tough matchup? No, he's got it in tough. Now, understand, guys, the first week, 2 and 3, right? The first couple weeks, it's going to be feeling out, right? Because the defenses have changed based on last year, right? So we're kind of predicating it a little bit based on last year. So if you say, well, Joe, you know, the Rams, they were a tougher defense last year against quarterbacks. Yeah, I get it. But this year, maybe they're not doing so good. We're in week 4. Maybe the Rams crap the bed. Things are going to change. So I adjust as we go. So this is starts and sits for week 1. I'm going to go through every single position and lay it out for you guys. A, B, C, and D. Sit back, relax, chill. We're going to have some fun. Energy's here. Football's here. Fantasy Football 2022 is here. I'm excited to dive in. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We go strong year long. Strong year long. I like the sound of that. Smash thumbs up. Helps the channel. Bring the energy, guys. Bring the heat. Bring that energy right now. Smash thumbs up. And in the comments below, if you have any questions for starts and sits, I'll cover you guys there as well. Now, you guys are probably wondering what I'm wearing on my head. You guys are really curious. Now, if you're in the car, you're not seeing it. I'm actually wearing something on top of my head. I put it on top of my head prior to the show, and I actually almost forgot forgot it was on my head as I'm going through this, okay? So before we get into starts and sits, I want to show you guys that this show is brought to you by Manscaped.com. Look at the gold plating on these underwear. Guys, I got to tell you, these are the most comfortable underwear I've ever worn. Look at the inside here, guys. Even gold plated or gold looking on the inside of the crotch area. Super soft, super durable, stretchy, comfortable, guys. Manscaped.com. The code you want to use is SHOWERLINE20. What I'm holding in my hand here is the Boxers 2.0. Again, you get different colors, different selections, different varieties of them. Again, Manscaped.com. SHOWERLINE20. These are the Boxers 2.0. Try them. Try the body wash. Try the deodorant. Go to Manscaped.com. Go treat yourself right now. But again, guys, you got to try these underwear. I mean, they're just super soft, super silky. Experience them, okay? This is what I'm featuring today. Check them out here. I'm going to zoom in one more time here. You can see Manscaped.com, guys. SHOWERLINE20. Go treat yourself. They're the sponsor of the show. I put the link here below. But that SHOWERLINE20 is going to save you 20% upon checkout. My balls are super comfortable, and so will yours once you get them. They will be anyway. All right, guys, let's get to this show. We're talking starts and sits week 1. Let's dive in right now. All right. First, let's start off with the quarterback position. This is very important, guys, because quarterbacks, you know, what you see is kind of what you get. But if you guys got the 16-round draft position, you know that you want to have a backup quarterback. I always get a backup quarterback. Sometimes I play matchups, right? Sometimes there's an injury. Sometimes there's a lack of performance out of my starter. So I always make sure I get a good backup. So sometimes you may want to start your backup over your initial guy that you spent a higher average draft position on, right? So let's start off with the quarterback starts and sits. Who's got favorable matchups? Who's got crappy, tougher matchups? Let's dive into it. Now, understand, a lot of this is predicated on last year's defenses to some degree, but there's been a draft, there's been changes, there's been shifts, there's been moves, there's been completely restructured defenses here, but we got to base it on something. So we're kind of going, first week is a bit of a crapshoot here, but I've got still a good idea on how tough the matchup is. So guys that have good matchups, let's talk about this. Starting at the quarterback position. And again, I do a DFS show Saturday, and I also do a preview show here on Thursday. So there's going to be a ton of content for you guys coming out throughout the season. Preview meaning the matchups, who I think is going to win, talk about the spreads, talk about matchups, expectations, injuries, all that stuff. That's on Thursdays, and the starts and sits is on Wednesday. So make sure you guys are subscribed. All right, optimal players at the quarterback position. Let's go here. Trevor Lawrence. I think he's got it pretty easy versus Washington here. Arguably the easiest matchup versus position. Jameis Winston, I know a lot of people didn't draft him. Throws a lot of picks based on his history, but he's got an easy matchup against Atlanta, okay? Kyler Murray versus KC. Lamar Jackson versus the Jets. easy matchup on paper. Again, this is week 1, guys. We're feeling it out. If you got a specific start and sit question, join the Patreon group, patreon.com/FFCounselor, the only place for direct access. Or, guys, if you're lucky, I'll get back to some questions here in the comments here on YouTube. Drop your starts and sits questions below. But I'm going to try to answer as many as I can here on this show, okay? Zach Wilson, I think, as far as I know, I think he's still banged up. Don't start him no matter what, okay? From what I understand, I still think he's banged up. It might be Flacco week 1. There's talk of him possibly starting. I haven't heard as of the time of this recording. I've been trying to stay on top of news. Zach Wilson news, not really on my radar as much because I don't own him. And even if you do own him, you shouldn't be starting him. He should be a backup at best, okay? Aaron Rodgers, a must start this week versus Minnesota. It's a divisional game. They're going to be playing hard. He's got some fancy new tools. Christian Watson's going to be exciting to see how those guys shine. I'm going to get to wide receivers in a moment, but Aaron Rodgers has got a good matchup here versus Minnesota. Jalen Hurts. A lot of people ask me, they have Jalen Hurts stock. They've got him. They've got another quarterback. They're saying, do I start Dak Prescott? Do I start Jalen Hurts? Jalen Hurts has more upside, but a little more of a risky pick, but he's got a favorable matchup versus Detroit, okay? Something to be aware of. Now, just because I'm saying these guys have favorable matchups, some of these guys like Carson Wentz got a favorable matchup versus Jacksonville. Do you start Carson Wentz or do you start a guy who's got a tougher matchup like Pat Mahomes? I'm going to still start Pat Mahomes. So understand, guys, I'm telling you that they have an easier, tough matchup, and then it's up to you guys to make and use your discretion on whether or not you're going to start them. I'm just telling you their match is favorable. So the guys I've mentioned, Lawrence, Winston, Kyler, Lamar, Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Hurts, Carson Wentz, and even Matt Ryan, Daniel Jones, and Kirk Cousins have favorable matchups, okay? Top 10 versus defense in regards to easy strength of schedule, all right? Mid-range matchups, guys. Davis Mills, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, Mitch Trubisky, Joe Burrow have mid-range matchups. So right in the middle is Justin Herbert, okay? Derek Carr, Jared Goff, all these guys have mid-range matchup. Russell Wilson playing against Seattle. It's a revenge game, right? He's got a mid-range matchup. So it's not the easiest, not the hardest, based and written on paper here, theoretically, quarterback versus defense, but it could be a revenge game. He could come in and absolutely tear it up and start his career off in a huge, strong fashion and big bang, okay? Something to be aware of. Guys that have it the toughest now, let's go. Stafford's got it in tough. That being said, Stafford could come out and tear it up. I'm just telling you, on paper, he's playing a tough defense in Buffalo. This is something you need to be aware of. So if you got Stafford, and let's say your backup is Kyler Murray, or let's say your backup is Aaron Jones or Matt Ryan, you may want to consider Matt Ryan over Stafford. I'm just saying it's a consideration. I'm not saying you have to do it. If you believe in Stafford, go for it, right? He's got Cooper Kupp. He's got all these weapons. But I'm just telling you, on paper, he's got it in tough. So does Tua. Tua's playing New England. New England was a tougher defense versus quarterbacks last season. That may continue on into this year. Tua Tagovailoa, Tagovailoa, as I say, that's how it looks and should be pronounced. Tagovailoa, right? Tagovailoa. I don't see the word tongue in there. But anyway, Tua actually has it in tough versus New England. Josh Allen has got it in tough. Not that you're going to start this guy, but Geno Smith has got it in tough versus Denver. Marcus Mariota versus the Saints got it in tough. Now, Marcus Mariota, Geno Smith, the next guy, got it in tough. Mac Jones may not be your starter, so don't worry, okay? But the guys that are starters that have it in tough this week, 7th hardest matchup versus position, Tom Brady versus Dallas. Dallas was a pretty good defense last year. Stout defense, solid defense last year, okay? Brady, 7th hardest matchup versus position on paper as of right now. Tough matchup. So the guys that are, starters that got tough matchups, potential starters, Matt Stafford, Josh Allen, right? Tough matchup, 3rd hardest versus position for Allen. Tom Brady, tough matchup, guys. Tom Brady, again, if you got a better option, maybe consider it. He's playing Dallas. But again, Tom Brady could come in and tear it up. Sometimes matchups don't mean everything, okay? Other guys, Pat Mahomes, 11th hardest versus position, playing Arizona. But it's Pat Mahomes. How do you bench him, right? So those are your quarterbacks, okay? Again, just to recap, Lawrence, Murray, Lamar, Aaron Jones, Jalen Hurts, Matt Ryan. Starters with great matchups. Russell Wilson, starter, mid-range matchup. Justin Herbert, mid-range matchup. Dak Prescott, mid-range matchup. Joe Burrow, mid-range matchup. 12th hardest versus position for Joe Burrow. Pat Mahomes, a little tougher, right? And like I said, Brady, Josh Allen, Matt Stafford, be cautious with those guys. Tougher matchups versus position. Again, as I'm saying this, say, okay, well, I've got these two, right? I've got this guy and this guy, right? And again, that example is Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's your backup, but, Josh Allen is your starter. You may want to consider Matt Ryan. And again, Josh Allen can come in and tear it up. I'm just telling you, based on matchup, Ryan's got it easier. So I've given you guys the layout of the landscape, right? It's up to you guys to make the educated decision on who you're going to start. And this is how I lay out the episode, because the easiest way to do starts and sits, right? I don't want to go on my opinion. Start this guy, I think that's a BS way of doing it. This is the fact, right? Because I'm going, and it's all research, it's all analyzed, predicated on the matchup, right? Predicated on how tough that matchup is, how tough that defense is playing against a quarterback. This is perfectly laid out for you guys, all right? Let's move on here to the running back position. Again, I'm covering all 16 games in this. If you're listening to this on Saturday, great. Okay, just omit. Say, well, Stafford's already played. I got to omit that, okay? Let's move on to the running back position. Who's got it in? Let's start off with the guys that got it in tough. Now, just because I say they got it in tough does not mean you bench that player. Okay, it does not mean you bench that player, but you make a decision. Let's talk about it. Saquon Barkley, all right? Arguably one of the toughest matchups versus position this week. He is playing, guess who? The Tennessee Titans. Now, their rush defense, pretty good. So that's something you need to be aware of. He's playing the Titans, and he's on the road. Something to always be aware of as well. If you're trying to decide, okay, are they on the road? Is the quarterback on the road? Is the team on the road? Could they do, I factor that in as well. I factor in all variables. But Saquon Barkley, week one, it's got it in tough. So if Saquon Barkley comes onto the scene, I'm really high on him this year, and tears it up week one, we're on to something, because Saquon could absolutely do well, because he's got arguably, on paper, the toughest matchup versus position. Something to be aware of, okay? Cornell Patterson, Damian Williams, Tyler Algier, anyone who's starting, that's a bit of a crapshoot there with the Falcons. They've got a tough matchup versus the Saints. You know them. They've got that tough rush defense, okay? Zeke Elliott, Pollard, they've got a tough matchup versus Bucks. I remember last year, a lot of running backs had it in tough against that Bucks defense, right? They hold the line. Uncle Lenny, Leonard Fournette, Buccaneers versus Dallas, tough matchups. Now, here's an exciting one. A lot of people asking me about, should I start Dameon Pierce? This is a great question. So I'm going to cover that right now. Dameon Pierce actually, at the time of this recording, just recently got the starting job. This is the guy I was telling you. Dameon Pierce is the guy. I trust Dameon Pierce. Marlon Mack sucks. Now it's official today. As of today, he's getting the starting job. But should you start him? Now, that depends on what your other options are. Okay, now as you go through this episode, you're going to get a lot of information. You get a lot of insight. But on paper, Dameon Pierce actually has the fifth hardest matchup versus position. That being said, I don't think it matters, because he's going to get the volume. He's going to be hungry. He's going to be ready to go. I'm still starting Dameon Pierce as a flex play. I like him, okay? Starter, workhorse running back, tons of potential, tons of hunger. But note, both him and Barkley got it in tough versus position this year. Be aware of that, all right? Let's keep going here, all right? Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'm not touching him. He's got it tough versus Arizona. David Montgomery versus San Fran, got it in tough. I'm just giving you guys some starters names here. Dalvin Cook here, guys. He's got it in tough here versus Green Bay, believe it or not. Their rush defense was amazing last year. Not amazing, but it's pretty solid. Eighth hardest versus position. Be aware of that. A lot of people interested in starting Devin Singletary. Years to wow, so we're not wowed. He sucks, and he's got a tough versus the Rams. Be aware of that, okay, guys? And again, this is a Thursday night game. So if you're listening to this on the weekend, that doesn't matter at this point. Breece Hall. A lot of people ask me about Breece Hall. Do I start Breece Hall or Dameon Pierce? Breece Hall, on paper, 10th hardest matchup versus position versus Baltimore. I'm still starting Breece Hall if I've got him. Again, very high draft capital in him. Third round pick this year, typically round 3 to 4. Maybe a solid flex play. Okay, if you want robust RB, but understand, they've said Michael Carter's a starter, which is crazy because Michael Carter actually fumbled the ball the last week of preseason. So that's something I'm looking at and going, man, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe Michael Carter gets the first couple snaps. He might start, but it's Breece Hall that's going to run away with this job eventually. So Breece Hall a little shaky in week one. It's more of a feeler out type situation there in New York, but 10th hardest matchup versus position, something to keep in mind if you're making a decision there. Nick Chubb, 11th hardest matchup versus position. James Robinson slated to start. All those guys that went Travis Etienne, man. Surprise, surprise. I told you James Robinson's coming back. I had the beat writer on the show. Robinson is going to be good to go. How much volume, how that's going to play out is going to be interesting, because if you see Robinson start, that's interesting. He's going to be the starter potentially, right? If you see Etienne start and Robinson gets some work in, we don't really know who the starter is because maybe they're just working, Robinson in slowly. So this is a situation to monitor if you're an ATN owner. But if you're an ATN owner and he's your RB1, even RB2, I'd be concerned. And I told you not to trust this guy as your RB1, okay? He hasn't played an NFL snap, right? And a lot of people are going, or the mainstream sheeps were telling you go 0 RB, like go wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and get ATN as your RB1 in round 5, which is ludicrous. I saw a ton of Consheeps people saying that, right? Everyone's a fantasy football analyst all of a sudden now, giving away this BS advice. Guys, it's not going to help you guys. That's why 16 rounds is the game changer. That's why you've got a backup plan for a backup plan. You went robust RB, and you're not in that situation. But Robinson, I think, is going to be a factor. This is a situation we'll be monitoring very, very closely, but they've got a relatively tough matchup versus position. Let's go with Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker, I don't know if I would trust him week 1. I'm going to sit him, predicate on he might not even start week 1 with that hernia. He might be good to go. If he's good to go, it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to fizzle out with Penny. But I'm imagining he's either not going to play or he's going to be rested or limited week 1. I could be wrong. Come out and shine, right? We don't know. But Kenneth Walker, I'm a little cautious about starting him this week, okay? Rashad Penny, we're going to see how he does against Denver. Relatively tough matchup versus position. Now let's talk about mid-range matchups for running backs. Christian McCaffrey, mid-range matchup versus Cleveland. Now, Christian McCaffrey, this is another situation you're going to want to watch because we're going to see how much Christian McCaffrey are we going to see. Are they going to unleash Christian McCaffrey and say, hey, you're going to go crazy now. Now he's playing at home crowd coming back. Are they going to say, hey, we're going to unleash this guy and we're going to set the precedent, we're going to set the stage for what's to come for the season? Or are we going to see a limited Christian McCaffrey because we know this guy gets hurt with non-contact injuries and has played 10 games the past 2 seasons? This is something that we're going to watch and we're going to monitor. It's going to be very, very interesting to see. All right, guys? Let's keep going here. James Conner, mid-range matchup versus KC. Now, we're going to start getting into some easier matchups here. There's a couple more mid-range. Cam Akers, actually. Elijah Mitchell, mid-range matchups if you're trying to decide. Cam Akers versus Buffalo versus the run. They're mid-tier. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a tough one either. It's going to be mid-range. So Cam Akers, another situation to monitor. Elijah Mitchell, mid-range matchup versus Chicago. Now, Chase Edmonds, do I trust him versus New England? Another mid-range matchup. Again, this is a tough one. I have no Chase Edmonds stock, but if you got him, start him. Najee Harris, mid-range matchup versus Cincy, definitely a must start there. You definitely want to start him. Again, this is where it gets a little dicey here. We get to easier matchups here. DeAndre Swift has an easier matchup versus Philly, but do we trust DeAndre Swift? You drafted him in the second round. If you drafted him, you got to trust him. I personally have no Swift stock, but this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Now, I watched a little bit of Hard Knocks. Jamal Williams is no slouch, man. This was a 50-50 committee. I can't imagine a guy with that type of line mentality and work ethic to sit down and give Swift that workload. I really believe Swift is going to be a bust this year, and a lot of people invested high draft capital in him because that's what the mainstream Consheeps just told you. He's a top 8 pick is what they said. I'm not sold on Swift being that good. He's going to be a big-time bust. Jamal Williams is going to eat. And I think if you're a Swift owner and you drafted him as your RB1, and again, a lot of people did that didn't follow my stuff or did not get 16 rounds, you're going to be pleasantly disappointed if that makes sense at all. Pleasantly disappointed. You're not going to be happy because, again, he had 151 attempts last year. I still don't think he's going to be a workhorse, and Jamal Williams is there to eat, right? Not really sold on that, but relatively easy matchup. Other easy matchups, Antonio Gibson. He's one fumble away from losing his job, but easy matchup. Aaron Jones and Dillon have easy matchups, something to be aware of. Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, great matchup versus the Giants in week 1. Excited. I got a lot of stock with Derrick Henry. Excited to see him get off on the right foot. Joe Mixon, I got some stock with him. Relatively easy matchup versus Pittsburgh. Austin Eckler, man, this is the week. I'm not a fan of Eckler, but he's playing Vegas. Relatively easy matchup. 5th easiest versus position. Let's see what happens. Is Spiller going to be a bit of a factor? Joshua Kelly, are they going to work Sony Michel in? Something to watch and monitor here with the Chargers as they play the Vegas Raiders, okay? Taylor, first overall pick, the king here. Well, second king behind Derrick Henry, but playing Houston. Relatively easy matchup versus position. Zamir White and Josh Jacobs have got it in easy. Javonte Williams versus Seattle. Easy matchup. Second easiest versus position. Miles Sanders, who I've got no stock in, sucks. Easy matchup versus position. And, of course, if you want to start anyone from Baltimore, which I am not, okay? They've all got easy matchups versus position. But, again, I'm not starting any any Baltimore running back this week or any week because I've got no stock in those guys. They've got it easy versus the New York Jets. All right, let's move on here to wide receivers, tight ends, and then we're going to give you guys, actually tune in Saturday. I'm going to give you guys the optimal DFS plays. I'll give you some good defensive matchups as well. Why not just give you guys some defenses as well? Because, again, we're doing starts and sits. Maybe you want to stream a defense. So we're going to talk about that as well. Now, before I get into wide receivers here, and if you guys are enjoying the show, which you should because there's a lot of important content here, make sure you guys do click that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, and visit our friends here at Prize Picks. Use code DFSLion. Experience Prize Picks, guys. If you haven't tried it, it's an amazing way to play DFS. It's available in many, many states, excluding some, and excluding Canada and Mexico as well. But try DFS with them. It's very simple. You pick 2 to 5 players, and all you do, guys, is pick the over-under on their projection. So Jonathan Taylor, week 1, over or under 100 rushing guys. Guys, it's very simple. You parlay a couple of them, and bam, you've got yourself a lineup. Daily fantasy and an amazing new style. You're going to love it. PrizePicks.com. I've also linked it below. Use code DFSLion. Go try it right now. All right, guys? Let's continue on here with wide receiver. Who has got, let's start off with the toughest matchup versus position. And this is going to be very interesting because it's primetime. Football is not, finally getting back. And Cooper Kupp at wide receiver has got a tough matchup versus Buffalo. We're going to see how he does. This is the first overall wide receiver off the board. Is Cooper Kupp going to thrive? Something to definitely watch and monitor. But he's got the toughest matchup versus position. Him, Robinson, Van Jefferson, tough matchups. Okay, let's rip this a little quicker. Let's rip through it. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy I love. Tough matchup versus position versus Philly. Devontae Adams got it in tough versus the Chargers. So, again, don't be discouraged if they absolutely suck week 1 because, again, they do have tough matchups. And these are guys, I don't have any draft capital in them. So if they do bust, I'd probably be all over it. But either way, they do have tough matchups. So maybe we'll give them a break in week 1, okay? Tyreek Hill, another guy. All these guys that were drafted in round 1 and 2, tough matchups. Waddle, Tyreek, 4th hardest matchup versus New England. Not going to be a walk in the park there. Keenan Allen, tough matchup. All these great wide receivers, guys, tough matchups. Judy Sutton playing Seattle, tough matchup versus position. Be aware of that. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Carolina versus Cleveland, tough matchup versus position. Amari Cooper, tough matchup versus position, believe it or not, versus Carolina secondary, okay? He's going to have it in tough. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett with their shiny new toy that is Geno Smith or Drew Lock. Who knows how that's going to pan out. It's going to be Geno Smith to start, but DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett got it in tough here versus Denver. But again, they've got Geno Smith throwing the ball. Going to be interesting to watch how that situation fizzles out. Devontae Parker, Mac Jones, right? Tough matchup versus position for his receivers against Miami secondary. Jacoby Myers, Parker, they've got it in tough. Who else has got it in tough here that we got to mention? Jalen Tolbert, CeeDee Lamb got it in tough versus Tampa Bay. Now we're starting to get into the mid-range matchup. Jamar Chase, mid-range matchup, and, the Bengals receiver. So as soon as I say Jamar Chase, assume T. Higgins has got a mid-range matchup as well, okay? Chase, Higgins, Pittsburgh, mid-range matchup. Robert Woods, so you got to consider Treylon Burks, mid-range matchup here, guys, versus the Giants. Let's keep on going here. Drake London, the guy that was banged up, one of my favorite wide receivers going into the season, in a prime position to succeed, guys. Drake London, mid-range matchup versus the Saints. He's good to go. From what I understand, he's going to be starting. Now, again, I do a last-minute Q&A, last-minute news and notes every Sunday morning. So I'm going to be covering this, guys, and some injuries beforehand. This is more of a starts and sits, so you get a feel for how tough the matchups are. Okay, guys? Again, Drake London, Falcons receivers, mid-range. Deontay Johnson should be good to go. I know he's banged up in that last preseason game. Check his injury status, which we'll cover on Sunday morning, or I might release that Saturday night. Deontay Johnson, mid-range matchup, something to be aware of, okay? Baltimore receivers, mid-range matchups. Stephon Diggs, mid-range matchups, guys, for all Buffalo Bills wide receivers. Keeping it going here. A lot of people ask about A.J. Brown. Do you start him? He's got a mid-range matchup, not the toughest here versus Detroit, okay? I'm going to go through some optimal matchups here at the wide receiver position. There's so many wide receivers to go through. But at the end of the day, guys, we're talking fantasy football draft strategy, and we're talking start and sit strategy. If you've drafted the right guys, start them. Start your starters for the most part. But I'm making you aware, guys, if you're torn between a couple guys. But you should know who's got it in good, who's got it in tough. Packers receivers. I can't wait to see this. Christian Watson, easy matchup versus position. Lazard as well, okay? Lazard was a little banged up. I'm going to check into that before that game time starts, okay? Elijah Moore got it in easy. Excited to see what he does versus Baltimore. Juju and all of Pat Mahomes' receivers got in relatively easy. Christian Kirk got it in easy. Again, drop your questions below if I missed anybody. Deebo Samuel, easy matchup versus position. San Fran versus Chicago. Deebo's got it in good. Ayuk's got it in good. Maybe some good DFS plays. Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, great matchup versus the Texans, but Texans made some good improvements in that draft. You know, is their defense going to improve? Something to watch. Michael Thomas has got an easy. We've got Saints receivers, Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, good, and Michael Thomas, great matchup versus position this week. Mike Evans and the Buccaneers receivers, great matchup versus Dallas secondary. Again, this is on paper. This is all documented statistically, but kind of predicated on last year to the most degree and how that defense performed. Everything's going to fizzle out after week 1, okay? And if you guys are asking here about Arizona's receivers, also good matchup versus position. And also, guys, Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins, and Houston, relatively good matchup versus position. All right, guys? Moving on to tight end here, and I'll give you guys some defenses. Make sure you guys do subscribe, thumbs up. And again, you're here for great information to help you guys get the edge on your teams. All right, guys? And again, football is super excited. I'm super excited, guys. We are finally here. Now, with tight end, it's a crapshoot. Start your best tight end, especially if you guys waited on tight end. I'm not going to spend too much time here other than tell you Darren Waller's got a good matchup. Hawkinson's got a good matchup. I'm going to give you guys some names here that are kind of the bigger names. Mo Alley Cox and the tight ends from Indy, good matchup. Tight ends from Houston got a good matchup. Brevin Jordan. Alberto, Denver, good matchup. I know a lot of people drafted him. Good matchup versus position. Cameron Brate, those famous tight ends from the Buccaneers, relatively easy matchup versus position. Guys that have it in tough, but you're not going to sit. Travis Kelce, second hardest matchup versus position at that position at tight end. Arizona plays tight ends really tough. Be cautious there. Tyler Higbee got it in tough. George Kittle got it in tough. Kyle Pitts, seventh hardest matchup versus position. The Saints defense played the tight end pretty tough last year. Be aware. Cole Kmet, tough matchup. And who else is there? I'm trying to see if there's another big name. And Robert Tonyan, also a guy that I've got some stock in. Tough matchup. And same with Austin Hooper versus the Giants. All right, guys? Some big names that have tough matchups, but you're not going to sit these guys because you're not going to sit Kelce. But be aware, he's got a tough matchup versus position. All right, guys? Let's go through some defense. I'm just going to give you some optimal defenses to start here for you guys. Again, you can join the Fantasy 365 community. I've linked it below. I deliver optimal players at each position, and we talk starts and sits. It's an amazing community. Fantasy 365 is under programs at thefantasyfootballcounselor.com. Also linked here below. And again, smash thumbs up helps the channel, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about some defenses. With defenses, again, it's a bit of a crapshoot because we don't know what we're going to get. Now, you've got the Commanders, who arguably have the best matchup versus position against Jacksonville, who's one of the worst teams last year, but it's a new team this year, right? So things change. But on paper, the Commanders, the Browns, the Saints, the Titans, the 49ers, Ravens, Jets, Colts, and Seahawks all have great matchups versus position. Even the Patriots and Jacksonville Jaguars. Optimal matchups. Let me repeat. Commanders, Browns, Saints, Titans, 49ers, Ravens, Jets, Colts, Seahawks, Jags, Patriots. Easy matchups versus position. Okay? If you've got the Rams defense, if you got the Cowboys defense, if you got the Bucks defense, if you got the Packers defense, all these guys are top defenses drafted on ADP relatively high because they were really good defenses last year. Great defenses, but they've got it in tough week 1. You need to be aware of this, okay? Dallas is playing Tampa Bay. Great defense, was a top defense in fantasy last year, but they're playing Tom Brady. Rams, great defense, but they're playing Josh Allen. So be aware of this, guys, and you may want to consider streaming a defense this year when we're talking starts and sits. All right, guys? That's it. I know it's a lot of talking. I know it's a lot of information, but all this is going to help you guys with your starts and sits. Drop your questions as well below. And, of course, subscribe and join the Fantasy 365 community. Also, guys, manscaped.com, showerline 20. Go get those underwear. All right, guys? I appreciate you guys. Super comfortable underwear. Subscribe, thumbs up, and we're going year-round. I'm also going to be doing breaking news on here in my shorts, so make sure you guys are subscribed and you turn on that bell for breaking news. All right, guys? Appreciate you. Go get them week 1. It's here. Lion mentality. Football is back. And if you got 16 rounds, you're ready to go. If you've been subscribed to this channel, you're ready to go. If you've been following the Sheepsis, good luck. You're wearing damage control. All right, guys, appreciate you. I'm out. Thank you. We'll talk soon.